Welcome, everyone. I'm Kimberly Boschman, and this is the Intentionally Intuitive podcast. In this episode, we're going to take a look at life path number 3 and the possible influences of each zodiac sign. So I recommend listening to your sun, moon, and rising zodiac signs to gain a greater understanding and larger perspective of what you could be working with the energies that you sort of signed up for in this lifetime to, again, influence and complement your life path number. I will provide timestamps in the description box below, as well as calculations for how to calculate your life path number if you're not sure what yours is. So let's go ahead and get into it, and we'll start off with Aries. Okay, so if you are an Aries sun, moon, or rising sign, and you're also a life path number 3, then this reading is for you. We're going to take a look at the higher and the lower expressions of both Aries and life path number 3 so that you can gain a better understanding of how these energies complement each other, how they might create a push and a pull situation, and how to best manage those energies. So let's take a look at Aries. Aries is a fire sign, okay? So when it's in its highest expression, Aries is often thought to be passionate, motivated, confident, with relentless determination. If you've ever met an Aries, once they get an idea or a vision about something and they set a goal, there's no stopping them. Aries can be very direct in their approach. Again, it's like if they see something they want, they're going after it. There's a lot of fire behind them. Some of the lower expressions of Aries are lack of patience, mood alterations, quick to anger, impulsivity, aggressiveness, and martyrdom. Almost like that warrior spirit that's sort of gone to an extreme. So what's interesting is if we look at the higher and lower expressions of the 3, you will see a lot of similarities. So if you're an Aries and a life path 3, you have a lot of fire behind you. Life path 3 is considered to be more of an extroverted energy. It is also considered to be that of like an Aries energy. And the element for 3s is fire. So again, you just got fire after fire after fire here if you have a lot of Aries in your zodiac chart or astrology chart. So let's look at the positive traits of the 3. So when 3s are in their highest expression, they are optimistic, they're sociable, they're friendly, they're an inspiring teacher, they're idealistic, they're good at explaining things. Again, a good teacher. They're very outgoing, they're creative, and possibly artistic. They tend to be intuitive with great insight, and they're usually intelligent and versatile. So again, you've got this very social, outgoing energy of the 3 when it's in its highest expression, and you couple that with the passionate, motivated, confident, and sort of relentless energy of Aries. And that's why I say, if you've got Aries and you've got a life path 3, and you're in your highest expression of both, whatever you set your mind to, you will accomplish. Your soul has come here with all of this fire to, take the action, take the risk, to, work towards that vision and that goal and attain it. Okay. So you've definitely set yourself up pretty well for that. However, if we look at the negative traits of the 3, and we couple that with the negative traits or the lower expressions of Aries, we can see how things can get out of control pretty quickly. And so again, if you've got a lot of Aries in your chart and are also a life path 3, you are going to have to, throughout your lifetime, work pretty diligently to keep that fire under control, like a controlled burn, right? You don't want it creating this rampant forest fire that's just out of control. And it could be very easy for that to happen with 3 and Aries. So again, just keep that in mind. And again, if you have Aries anywhere really in your zodiac chart or your astrology chart, especially sun, moon, rising, then this is going to be a theme for you that's going to continue to emerge. And you just need to figure out not how to extinguish the fire, because that's such a part of your core, but how to work with it, right? How to get it under control so it doesn't control you. So let's look at the negative traits again of Aries, and let's look at the traits for the 3. So the negative traits of the 3 are self-centeredness, moodiness, impulsivity, hyper-reactive. Okay, you couple that with Aries energy, which is that lack of patience and moodiness and quick to anger. That's gonna be something to contend with, especially that hyper-reactivity, arrogance, boastfulness. 3s tend to exaggerate things when they're in their lower expression. So making a mountain out of a molehill is a good example. And then when you're in your lower expression of 3, you're often like really good at starting things, but you're poor at finishing them, right? So like you get the idea and you're full force ahead, and then it kind of like simmers out and you're like, meh, and you like move on to something else. So not so great at finishing things when you're in your lower expression. 3s can often have a lot of scattered energy, their hands in a lot of different pots when they're in their lower expression. And again, that creates this energy of like starting 5 million different things and not finishing anything. And so your energy is very, very scattered, which when you're very creative, which 3s tend to be very creative, that can hinder you, right? Like the creativity is a blessing for 3 energy in moving that fiery life force through you. But if you're in your lower expression of the 3 and you've got scattered energy, or you're starting things and not finishing them, then you start to lose the trust of your clients, of the people that you're meant to work with, who you're creating for, all of those things. And also with 3 being a very social energy, right? Like out in the public a lot, very extroverted energy, like wants to be seen, wants to be heard, wants to be experienced. If you're in your lower expression, you can come across as really arrogant, as moody, as impulsive, as self-centered. And you look at the lower expression of Aries, and it's basically a mirror. It's the same kind of energy, that lack of patience, mood alteration, quick to anger, egotistical, aggressive, martyrdom. So you can kind of see, like, if you're in your lower expression of both the 3 and the Aries, not a lot of people are going to be really drawn to you. They're going to sort of be repelled by you because that energy is so self-centered, right? Whereas if you're in your higher expression of Aries and the 3, people will be so drawn to you, like a moth to the flame, right? Like people are just drawn to that outgoing, creative, intelligent, intuitive, sociable, friendly, inspiring, idealistic energy. And not only that, but you've got that Aries behind you, which means you're going to get it done. You're going to get it done, right? It's like that determination and that passion and motivation, along with that confidence, right? So with all that being said, there's nothing wrong with the negative traits of a sign or of your life path number, right? Like that, those negative traits are teachers to help you to see what that feels like to be in your lower expression, to see what kind of experience you create by being in that lower expression, so that you can pull from the tools that will surface from the challenges that surface. And the wisdom, so that when you fall into those negative traits in the future, because it's an ongoing thing, right? We dip into that quite often, right? You'll have the tools to be able to pull yourself out of it and to find a higher elevation. So just be aware of that. And like I said, when you're in your higher expression of the 3 and Aries, you will feel good. It will feel like you are in purpose. It will feel like you've got a fire within you that's not out of control, but that is very much fueling your creative energy. It's really beautiful. It's very complementary. And like I said, 3 energy is Aries energy. It is a fire element. And so together they're very, very complementary. However, when you're in those lower expressions, they can fuel each other and just get out of control to this raging, forest fire, right? Just out of control, just devouring everything in its sight to fuel its own ego. So I would say for you, if you're a 3 and you've got Aries, it's kind of like a double-edged sword. You set yourself up to accomplish what you set out to accomplish in this lifetime with a lot of ambition and drive and creativity. It's beautiful complementary energy. But the flip side of that is, when you fall into those negative traits, you can really be sort of self-destructive. So I would just say, and again, it's normal to fall into those lower energies, but just be aware of them, be aware of how you feel when you're in them, and it will sort of prompt you to try to find the resources and the tools to move beyond them, right? And move above them and learn the lessons of them, right? Okay, so I hope that this was helpful. Thank you so much for listening. Take care. Bye for now. Taurus, if you are a sun, moon, rising Taurus sign and you are also a life path number 3, then this reading is for you. We're going to take a look at the higher and lower expressions of Taurus energy, as well as the higher and lower expressions of the 3, so that you can see how they complement each other, work against each other, what you have to contend with having these Taurian energies, as well as 3 energies within your experience. So Taurus is an earth sign. When Taurus is in its highest expression, you often see this really strong desire for both social and corporate stability. You see this desire for extravagance and the finer things in life. Taurus energy is very content with, their home surroundings. They can kind of sort of get into their habitual ways and be okay with that and enjoy that, having the home life, having the solid career, having the stable home life, right? And having stable friends and all that. And so again, they sort of are more drawn towards contentment and security. Taurus are very dependable and dedicated in life and love, which is really beautiful. When we look at the lower expressions of Taurus, we have stubbornness, not willing to take risks or leave their comfort zone, very predictable and rigid in their beliefs and their actions. So for the most part, very set in their ways. And Taurus energy can also be sort of fall into perfectionism. So keep that in mind as we move into the 3 energy, as we look at the higher and the lower expressions of that. So first, let's look at the higher expressions. So 3 energy is more extroverted. I would say with Taurus energy, it's probably a little more introverted is how it sort of feels. But with 3 energy, we have a more sort of extroverted energy. If it was to be compared to, its astrological connection, it would be Aries. So you think of Aries energy, it's very, in your face, sort of like very ambitious, very driven. 3 energy is a fire energy. So actually that fire really complements that earth energy of the Taurus. The earth energy sort of is the fuel for that fire, right? To keep it burning. The 3 in its positive traits are, is very optimistic, is sociable, friendly, inspiring, idealistic, good at explaining things, very outgoing, creative, and possibly artistic. 3 energy is usually very intuitive with good insight, right? They're very in touch with themselves and their inner compass. They're usually very intelligent and very versatile and adaptable. So if we look at the Taurus energies of that strong desire for social and corporate stability, 3s tend to be a little bit less, they're more likely to take risks. But when you have that grounding energy of Taurus, like it helps the 3 to set the goals, right? And to stay the course, to continue along the path, to accomplish whatever that 3 has set out to accomplish. And so that's where it becomes very complementary. Whereas, if it's like, maybe another fire sign, you can sort of get easily distracted or take on too much or whatever the case may be. But Taurus, I think, is going to keep you very grounded and sort of more practical and realistic in what you try to set your mind to, what you try to set your intention to, right? Like your goals, so that you're not taking on 12 million different goals. You're very practical in that process, because you're going to have this desire from within that's coming from that Taurus energy that's going to assist you to want to achieve that social, corporate, familial stability, right? And so, and for those finer things in life. So it's kind of like you have that added component of like wanting to, accomplish things and be the one, be that one who's achieved, right? Who has achieved the finer things in life, probably has the nice car, the nice house, right? Like all of those things that are valued by that Taurus energy. And that's not a bad thing. It's, they've got that energy of like wanting that experience in this lifetime. And that dependability, right? So again, you couple that with a 3 energy, which is very social, very friendly, very inspiring and idealistic, as well as outgoing. And you can see how if you have Taurus energy and 3 energy, you've probably got a big social circle. You probably have a nice network, right? That will not only help you emotionally, but also professionally to achieve what it is that you want to achieve. So you can see how they complement each other very, very well. Now, if we look at the lower expressions, we've already talked about the lower expressions of Taurus, that stubbornness, not willing to take risks or leave their comfort zone, very predictable and rigid in their beliefs and their actions, and very set in their ways. So you can see how that energy would be conflicting for 3 energy, because when 3 is in its highest expression, or that side of yourself is in its highest expression, because you're not as willing to, 3 is very creative energy. In order to be very creative and create new things and really just express that side of yourself, that creative self-expression, you have to be able to take risks. You have to be able to not be too rigid, because then you're not playing as much. You're not exploring as much. You're not allowing those creative life forces to flow through you, and it gets sort of like stuck energy. So that could be an issue with Taurus energy and 3 energy, is that creative life force that is the 3 energy gets stuck pretty easily. And so you just need to make sure that you're finding ways to keep it moving, right? Now, when we look at the negative traits of the 3, we've got self-centeredness, moodiness, impulsivity, hyperreactive, arrogance, exaggeration, right? Making a mountain out of a molehill. You're a good starter at things, but you're a poor finisher. So you have all this scattered energy. And so honestly, like the Taurus energy, even if you're in your lower expression, may help to sort of mitigate this sort of more fiery energy of the negative traits of the 3, because it's so grounded, right? The only issue with that is that you're probably going to feel a little bit like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and kind of like a push and pull energy. If you're in your lower expression of your 3 and your lower expression of your Taurus, you're going to feel like 2 different people almost, right? Like you've got like this moody, sort of like hyperreactive, exaggerating energy that's very scattered of the 3, but then you also got the very like in my comfort zone, very predictable, very rigid, in your beliefs. And so it just creates sort of like this really intense push and pull when you're in those lower expressions. And I would say it'd be very hard to be in one lower expression while you're in a higher expression of another, although you could be in a lower expression of the Taurus and then in your higher expression of your 3, and that's still going to hinder you because it's going to keep you sort of stuck. We talked about that. It's going to sort of stagnate that creative energy and maybe keep you more introverted when you're really sort of such a big part of you is so extroverted and outgoing and friendly and optimistic and meant to have big social circles, right? Like 3 is a very social energy. So the Taurus energy could sometimes constrict that and create a situation where you don't feel like yourself, like something is missing, right? And so that's kind of where we would see you would be in your lower expression of Taurus, but your higher expression of your 3. Now, again, if you're in your lower expression of your 3 and your lower expression of your Taurus, you're going to feel this major push-pull, this like tornado within you, and you can't figure out what's going on, like why you feel like 2 different people. And so again, it's just a matter of working through those lower expressions, facing those challenges, and gaining the insight that you're meant to gain through those experiences, because there's nothing wrong with those lower expressions. It's just we're meant to experience our lower expressions to teach us something, to give us our lessons, to understand those parts of ourselves, and then understand the tools and the wisdom that we need to be able to elevate ourselves when we find ourselves stuck, right? Or in those lower expressions. So I hope that this has been helpful, especially as you sort of dip in and out of those lower expressions as you move through life, as we all do, to sort of understand when you've fallen into those energies and how that might feel for you. And then you can work towards moving beyond them into your higher expressions. Because again, in the highest expressions of Taurus and 3, it's very, very complementary energy, very complementary and beautiful energy. They work really, really well together. So definitely a good thing. It's just when we fall into those lower expressions that it can get a little bit dicey for you. Okay, you all, I hope that this was very helpful. Thank you so much for listening. Take care. Gemini, if you are Gemini sun, moon, or rising, and also a life path number 3, then this reading is for you. So let's take a look at the higher and lower expressions of Gemini, as well as for the 3 energy, to kind of see how these energies complement each other, how they might work against each other, what kind of challenges you might face, and so on. Okay, so Gemini is, of course, an air sign. When Gemini is in its highest expression, we see this energy of being very adaptable, very easygoing, very intelligent, outgoing and social, very perceptive, very aware of their surroundings and their experiences. They tend to be very analytical and inquisitive and highly passionate about what they set their sights on, right? The lower expression of Gemini can bring indecisiveness, impulsivity, unreliability at times. Sometimes Geminis, when they're in their lower expressions, have difficulty in planning things, and they have a tendency to be inconsistent in many areas of life when they're in that lower expression. So when we look at the 3 energy is very extroverted. I would also say that Gemini energy feels pretty extroverted as well. It's a very social energy. So we have this extroverted energy of the 3. If we look at the astrological connection, it's actually Aries, so it's a fiery energy. So again, that element for 3 is a fire. So we have Gemini, an air sign, and 3, a fire sign. And so that air breathes life into that fire, right? It gives it the oxygen that it needs. So you can already see that this is going to be complementary energy. Some of the positive traits of the 3 are very optimistic, sociable, friendly, inspiring, idealistic. You can already see how the Gemini positive traits and the 3 positive traits really go hand in hand. They're almost like mirrors. 3s are very good at explaining things. They're very outgoing, creative, and artistic. They are usually very intuitive with very good insight, right? And that's also like Gemini. Geminis are very intuitive and have great insight from their need to explore. They're very analytical and learning nature, right? 3s are also very intelligent and versatile. So again, you can see how the adaptability, the easygoingness, the intelligence, the outgoing and social aspects, the analytical and the inquisitive and the passionate energies of the Gemini really fuel that fire of the 3, that social aspect of the 3, right? The optimism, the very social friendly, idealistic energy. 3 energy is very creative. That's usually, when I see 3 energy, I usually see people who are like in the arts or photographers, and they usually have a lot of accolades around their creativity, right? Like they're very good at like socially expressing themselves in a creative way. And they're usually very well received in that aspect, right? And so you need sort of that adaptability of the Gemini in that 3 energy, because a lot of times 3s are going to be, because again, it's this very extroverted energy. They want to be out there. They want to be seen. They're kind of like this larger than life personality. And that's sometimes, of course, the shadow of the 3 is they try to make themselves small to fit in because they're such bigger than life, personalities, but they're meant to be. And then when you have that Gemini energy, which is also kind of like a larger than life personality for the most part, right? Depending on what else is in your chart, but it's a very social energy. And so again, it just really pushes the 3 to get out there, to be seen, to be themselves, to be authentic, to share their gifts, to share their creativity, to authentically step into who they are, right? And to be inquisitive, and which really feeds into that intelligent nature and that creative energy of the three. It's like that sort of lust for knowledge, right? And wisdom just fuels the fire for that three and that creativity and creating new and exciting things that maybe haven't been seen before, right? But that gives the Gemini energy, gives that three the courage to be able to do some of the things that they want to do without feeling like self-conscious, right? Of that they're being too much or too big of an energy. When we look at the negative traits of the three, we can kind of see how, it just becomes sort of this convoluted mess when we have the lower traits of the three and the lower traits of the Gemini together. It can kind of be a little challenging, to be honest. So you have the negative traits of the three, which are self-centeredness, moody, impulsive, hyper-reactive, arrogant, exaggerating, right? Like your energy is or your personality can be very exaggerative. Like, I don't even know if that's a word. You tend to exaggerate, right? Like creating mountains out of molehills, seeing things differently than they actually are and seeing it as like a personal attack. You can be good at starting things but bad at finishing things. And you usually have like really scattered energy. And one thing with Gemini and its lower expression is very scattered energy, unreliability, right? Indecisiveness, impulsivity to the point where you fall into an extreme. You become so impulsive that it's crippling, right? And this tendency to be inconsistent. And so when you couple that with that hyperreactivity of the three, and then you've got all this scattered energy everywhere, you can just see how that can just leave you feeling really depleted at times. And like you're putting all this, you might ask yourself, like, I'm putting all this energy out there and nothing's coming back to me. Well, that's a really good question to ask yourself is my energy scattered? Like, am I putting all my energy out into 5 million different places and nothing's coming back to me because it's so scattered, right? Like I haven't focused on something and put my energy into one or two things to build that energy up, right? Instead, it's just like 5% of your energy to a million different things. So it's really hard to bring in anything tangible in that when you're in that energy because things are so scattered. When you couple that with a Gemini energy, same thing. It's this very sort of, in the lower expression, it's a very scattered energy. And so again, it just kind of leads to maybe feeling like you're stuck even though you're putting in a lot of effort and you can't figure out why. And that can just be that, again, you're just scattered. You've just got your energy in too many different pots at the same time. And you need to be able to sort of find your focus. And so that's what I could see, that really stands out with those lower expressions of both Gemini and the three is that you're just going to really be like all over the place. You're going to be very scattered. And then when things aren't happening the way that you want them to happen, because you're so scattered, because you have your hands in a million different places and, just a lot going on there, then you can become, you can tend to exaggerate and be like, well, the world is always out to get me, or this isn't working, I'm not good at this, or whatever the case may be, and really kind of beat yourself up. But really it comes back to like, how are you focusing your energy? What are you focusing your energy on? And starting from there, because more than likely it's just a situation where you're overextending yourself and you need to rein that in a little bit. And then with the indecisiveness and the impulsivity of especially the impulsivity of the lower expression of Gemini, and then that sort of hyperreactivity of the three, you can have a situation where you just go on a binge one night and buy everything from Amazon or from Etsy or whatever, and then wake up the next morning and you're like, what did I do? Like, where did all my money go? Or whatever. And so you just gotta kind of be aware of it. When we're in our lower expression, which we dip in and out of our entire lives, it's not a bad thing. It's just meant to teach us something. But when you're in that lower expression, it's not going to feel good. It's going to feel off, right? And so as opposed to when you're in your higher expression of the three in Gemini, you're going to feel really good. You're going to feel on fire. You're going to feel like you are taking the world by storm, that you're unstoppable. Things are just going to be falling into place. But, again, we are meant to fall into those lower expressions to teach us something, because that's where the lessons are. That's where the growth is. That's where we can start to see, like, okay, this doesn't feel good. How do I move beyond it? How do I acquire the tools to be able to move beyond it? How do I elevate my energy? And it's a constant process, right? We just acquire more and more tools and resources to be able to do it maybe a little bit more quickly as we continue throughout life, right? But hopefully that's helpful to kind of give you some insight as to, if you're a Gemini and you're also a life path 3, how you can use the higher expressions of both energies to assist you in what it is that you want to accomplish, right? And how when you see things sort of stagnate or get frustrating or, just become sort of derailed, you can kind of take a closer look and see, am I in my lower expressions right now? And what do I need to do to, learn whatever it's trying to show me and move beyond this, right? So hopefully this was helpful. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all again soon. Cancer. So if you are Cancer, Sun, Moon, and Rising, and you're a Life Path 3, then this reading is for you. So Cancer, Sun, Moon, Rising, and a Life Path 3, this is for you. So we're going to take a closer look at the higher expressions of Cancer, the lower expressions of Cancer, as well as the higher and lower expressions of the 3, so that you can kind of see how they complement each other, how they may work a little bit against each other, what you'll have to contend with as you move through this journey of life. So Cancer is a water sign, so very emotive energy, right? And so when Cancer is in its highest expression, we see this very nurturing energy, very sensitive, compassionate, security seeking, right? Like they like home life, they like family. They're sort of really drawn to that, right? That's really important for them. They often seek deep, intimate connections with people. They're usually very loyal and very protective. They're very intuitive and very psychic as well. When we look at the lower expressions of Cancer, we see this energy of being very withdrawn, almost like a hermit, overly emotional. So their emotions are in control of them, as opposed to them having any level of control over their emotions. And things can get a little bit, they can fall into those inner depths pretty quickly. They can be moody, they can be over sentimental and really kind of stuck in the past a little bit. They can tend to be vindictive when they're in their lower energy, and they can be lacking emotional maturity, which again, it's kind of like the emotions take over and they just don't have control over them. When we look at the energies of the 3 is much more extroverted. So you can already kind of see now that we're stepping into some territory here where it's a little bit of opposites, a little bit of opposite energy, because 3 is also more Aries energy. It's more of a fire element, so more of a fire sign. So again, it's complementary, and I'll show you how in just a minute. But you can also see how it's like, if that Cancer energy, that Sun, Moon, Rising, if you're too into it or if you're in your lower expression, you can put out the fire of your 3, right? Or if you're too in your 3 energy and you're out of balance between that 3 and Cancer energy, then that 3 energy can just take over and just evaporate the water energy of the Cancer, right? So let's look at the higher expression of the 3s. So we have optimism, sociable, friendly, inspiring teacher, idealistic, good at explaining things, very outgoing. 3 is a bigger than life energy when they are in their higher expression. It's a very social energy. It's very extroverted. Now, that doesn't mean that if you're a 3 and you're more introverted, that there's something wrong with you. Obviously, you could have other numbers within your chart or your report, your numerology report, that would bring about that introvertedness, right? But you're just meant to find your balance. And also you could be working with more like, you could have a lot of Cancer energy where it's more introverted. And so you, again, just need to find your balance. But 3 within itself is very extroverted, very out there, larger than life, very creative energy. 3s are very outgoing, very creative, very artistic, very intuitive, and good with their insight. And they tend to be very intelligent and versatile. So again, if we look at those positive attributes of the Cancer, which is again, intuitive, psychic, loyal and protective, and seeking deep and intimate connections, it actually is very complementary to the 3, because as a social creature, right, the 3 is going to need that sort of desire for deep, intimate connections to create a larger network, to create a larger social environment that is supportive for them, right? Like, so they're not just bringing in people who are, there for the money or there for the what the 3 can do for them. They're there for those deep, intimate connections and what they get out of the energetic exchange with the 3, right? And vice versa. And so you can see how the Cancerian energy, with that being very nurturing and sensitive and compassionate, assists the 3 and its endeavors in its outgoing nature, right? And so building those relationships and having it be of substance, like not just having relationships that again are sort of futile, or where that 3 is being taken advantage of, because that can happen. Like 3s are just very outgoing and very giving and creative. So again, people may come to you for your creative expertise and want to get it for free, right? Or not pay for it, or whatever the case may be, or get a major discount or whatever. And, at some point that's going to leave you feeling depleted. So the Cancerian energy of like, just being aware of the people who you're surrounding yourself with, but also that very compassionate energy really sort of balances out the more negative traits of the 3, which I'll go over in just a second. So you can see how it's like if you have more Cancerian energy and you're a 3, is bringing in that more sort of feminine energy to sort of balance out the more heavily masculine energy of the 3, that fiery energy. So it's very, very complementary. If we look at the negative traits of the 3, you can see how those positive traits of the Cancer energy, again, helps to sort of not put the fire out, but keep it contained, right? So negative traits of the 3 are more like self-centeredness, moody, impulsivity, hyper-reactive, arrogant, tends to exaggerate things, like creating mountains out of molehills. They're good starters, but they're poor finishers. They usually will have very scattered energy if they're in their lower expression. So again, you can kind of see how that more like nurturing, loving, sensitive energy of the Cancer will sort of calm the storm, the firestorm of the 3 if it's in its lower expression. So it kind of balances it out sort of nicely. So if you're in sort of your higher expression of your Cancer, but you start falling sort of in your 3 energy, lower expression, again, you can kind of see how that more like softer energy of Cancer calms those negative traits of the 3. Now, if you're in your lower expression of Cancer, which again is withdrawn, overly emotional, moody, over sentimental, vindictive, lacking emotional maturity, and then you couple that with a 3, that can be a little terrorizing. That can be a little scary, because you've got like this hyperreactivity, this arrogance, this moodiness, impulsivity, a tendency to exaggerate, self-centeredness, and then you couple that with being like overly emotional, moody, vindictive, and lacking emotional maturity. That's going to be, that could be that could be something to contend with. Let's put it that way. So, but the thing is, it's like we're meant to fall in and out of our lower expressions throughout life. So you're going to have times where you are in those lower expressions, and it might be when you were younger and you've figured out that doesn't feel good, and so you've found ways to kind of elevate when you fall back into them. But there's going to be people who are going to have to spend some time in those lower expressions to really figure out that this isn't who I am. This is meant to show me something, but I'm not meant to stay here in this energy, because what both the Cancer and the 3 energy have to offer when you're in your higher expression will just bring you so much joy, so much happiness, and will do the same for the people who are able to, be a part of your light, right? So I would say it could be very challenging for you if you are a Cancer and a 3 and you're in your lower expressions of both. And you might not be aware of it, but I would say that if you're listening to this, then you probably are very self-aware. You're aware of like when you start to fall into those more negative traits, right? And it's just a matter of understanding like, okay, I don't feel good. I don't like how I'm treating people. I don't like how I'm treating myself. I don't like how I'm, just this ball of rage as opposed to, my more natural, outgoing, social, friendly, inspiring, optimistic self. Or very nurturing self of the Cancerian energy, right? And so you just recognize it. You just recognize when you just feel, it just feels off, right? You just feel like, you don't feel good. And so again, it's not a bad thing to be in those lower expressions. They're meant to show us something. They're meant to teach us something. But I would say for you all, it could be very challenging if you fall into both of those lower expressions. And it can be very challenging to sort of get out of that because it's just sort of that energy. It's such powerful energy. It really is. Like those lower expressions are very powerful energy and they can kind of keep pulling you down. And so again, it's just, especially when emotions are involved, especially when that Cancerian energy of emotions are involved, then it fuels that hyperreactivity and that tendency to exaggerate and the moodiness and impulsivity of the lower expressions of the three. So it can be a little bit challenging, but again, you obviously signed up for these energies for a reason. There's something there to, that's meant to teach you something. And sometimes we can even see how like the lower expressions, as we move through those, teach us something about past lives experience, right? Like ways that we've treated people in the past that we're not meant to duplicate in this lifetime. So we need to move beyond them, right? So again, just not something to fear, but just to understand that this is a part of you. And this is something that, you'll experience in and out throughout your life. And as you move in and out of it, you'll acquire the tools and the resources and the wisdom to be able to elevate yourself more quickly out of them when you dip into them. So powerful energy is very interesting to see the 3 and the Cancer energy. So far, that's probably one of the more difficult, only when it's in its lower expressions. To deal with. But when you're able to do that and overcome it, then you become that much more resilient, that much more powerful, that much more understanding of who you are and what you're capable of, both good and bad, right? So I hope that this was helpful. Thank you all so much for listening, and I will see you again soon. Leo, if you are a Leo sun, moon, or rising sign, and you're also a life path number 3, then this reading is for you. So we're going to take a look at the higher and the lower expressions of Leo, as well as the higher and lower expressions of the 3, so that you can kind of see how those energies complement each other, how they work together, how they maybe work against each other, and could create some challenges for you, so that you can understand yourself a little bit better. So Leo is a fire sign. And when Leo is in its highest expression, we see sort of this natural born leader. We see drive, compassion, this big-hearted Leo energy, right? Like big heart of the lion. They're very generous with their time, their energy, and their money. They can be very self-assured and confident, but not in an egotistical way, just very, again, self-assured. When we fall into the lower expressions of Leo, we see the ego come out, right? That more egotistical, stubborn, arrogant, dominating, possessive, jealous, pompous, and very self-absorbed energy, right? So when we look at the higher and lower expressions of the 3, you can start to see how they really fuel each other in a good and a not so great way. So 3 is more extroverted energy, similar to Leo. I feel like Leo is more extroverted in its energy. Leo is its sort of astrological connection would be that of Aries, and it is also a fire sign. So we have fire for the 3 and fire for Leo. So that's a lot of fire energy. Which, if fire gets out of control, it can be very destructive. So just keep that in mind, right? So 3 in its highest expression, we see this energy of optimism, sociable energy, very friendly, inspiring, idealistic, a good teacher, very outgoing, creative, intuitive, and intelligent and versatile. And so it's interesting. It's like you can see how the energy at the highest expression of Leo, this natural leadership, this drive, compassion, the big heart, and the generosity, right? and the confidence all fuel that fire of the 3 to, because 3 is big energy. It can be larger than life energy. People who have 3 life paths, usually at their core, are very sociable creatures. They like to be seen, they like to be heard, they like to be experienced, they like to be the center of attention sometimes, right? Like they just have this, and it's not an egocentric energy. It's a very like, they just have a lot of creative life force flowing through them, and their personalities are often just bigger than life. And a lot of times they lack the confidence or the self-assuredness to be able to step out into the world and really share that joy, that just part of themselves, right? They often will try to make themselves smaller, minimize who and what they are, to fit in to this sort of quieter energy of the collective, right? Like what's acceptable. And so this Leo energy is beautiful because it actually brings out that natural sort of like confidence and, again, self-assuredness and just that drive, but also the compassion. Like 3 energy, 3s are often very, very kind and compassionate and, again, friendly. They're very sociable people. And so they are meant to attract a crowd. They're meant to just like, meet people on the street and people just are drawn to them and their energy because they're just so again, just optimistic and just idealistic and like outgoing. You know what I mean? They just attract that energy. So Leo, that energy, if you're sun, moon, rising Leo, that energy really assists the 3 in stepping into their authenticity, their own, right? And 3 is also very creative energy. It's meant to be very self-expressive, creatively, right? And so I feel like that Leo energy, again, giving them that confidence to create whatever it is that their heart desires, and then to be able to promote it in a way that feels authentic for them. So again, very complementary energies. You just almost have like, because it's just fire with fire, you just have like this roaring flame that when it's contained in the sense that it's not out of control, right? Like it's a big energy to work with, both Leo and 3. But when you are in control of that energy, then you are unstoppable. You get to forge your path. You get to decide, what it is that you're doing, what you create, who you attract, all of that stuff. It's a very manifesting energy. It's when that fire gets out of control that we run into a lot of challenges. And so again, if you signed up for Leo, sun, moon, rising, as well as a 3 energy, you signed up to accomplish big things in this life, to be a force to be reckoned with. But remember, it's how we utilize that energy. And so when you're in your highest expressions of both Leo and 3, you're just unstoppable. You're just this beautiful flame, right? To just, it's just beautiful, beautiful energy. It's very, very complementary. However, when you're in your lower expression of Leo, which is very egotistical, stubborn, arrogant, dominating, possessive, jealous, pompous, self-absorbed, and you're in your lower expression of 3, which is very self-centered, very moody, very impulsive, very hyper-reactive, very arrogant, tends to exaggerate, so makes big mountains out of little molehills, and blames people for their experience, right? And just this energy of being very scattered. When we couple those 2 energies, this is where it can become very destructive very quickly. So if you're somebody who is Leo and a 3, and your current situation is just a complete mess because you've burned everything down, right? Just understand that it's not a bad thing. It's not fixable. It's not that it's not fixable. It is fixable. And whatever you're in right now is meant to, teach you something, show you something, help you to acquire the tools and the resources and the wisdom to be able to elevate yourself out of these negative traits. Because again, the negative of the 3 and the Leo is just very destructive energy. It's just very destructive. It's fire that is out of control. And it's going to be really hard to rein that in, but it's going to be like, when you become aware of it, and you're going to know because you're not going to feel good. You're going to feel like this this Tasmanian devil that's just, on this destructive path. And you may ask yourself, like, why is nothing working out for me? Why does everything I touch, burn or whatever, right? Like relationships, ventures, maybe your creativity is stagnant, or maybe what you're creating is not having a good influence, but rather a bad influence, right? And so you just have to really take a closer look. And I would anticipate that, there's going to be people who are Leos and threes who are very much in their negative traits, and they're not going to be aware of it. They're just going to be living their life, just burning everything in their path. I would anticipate that if you're listening to this podcast, then you are very self-aware, right? You know that there's something going on. And so when you dip into those lower traits and things just start getting out of control, and you feel like you just are, again, just on a war path, right? Then because of that self-awareness, you can begin to take a closer look at the challenges that surface, because challenges will surface. When we are in our lower expressions, that's when we start to see the challenges. That's when we start to get the lessons, because we're meant to experience this side of ourselves, because this is a side of ourselves. We're meant to experience this side of ourselves, but we're also meant to use those higher expressions, right? Our higher soul, higher consciousness, to help lift us beyond these lower expressions. But we have to do the work to do that, right? And then it's through that work that we acquire the wisdom, the tools, the resources, so that when we dip back into those negative traits in the future, because we will, it's part of life, we'll be able to become quickly aware of it and then move ourselves out of it pretty quickly as well. But that's, like I said, those negative traits are where the lessons are, where the soul growth is. Through those experiences. So it's not a bad thing. It's not something to be ashamed of with those lower expressions. It's just it's through the awareness that we start to understand how to move beyond it, how to transmute that energy. And for Leos and threes, you have a lot of energy. It's just a lot of energy to transmute if you're in those lower expressions. And again, it's not a bad thing, but it's definitely like intense. There's a lot of intensity in those lower traits for both when it's coupled together. However, keep in mind, when you're in your higher expression of Leo and your higher expression of three, you are unstoppable. You came here with this just massive life force behind you to assist you in what your soul came here to accomplish in this lifetime. And that is powerful energy. That is very, very beautiful, powerful energy. So you just gotta kind of work with the lower traits and the higher, and to get you to the higher traits type thing. So powerful, powerful, powerful energy, definitely. So I hope that this was helpful. I hope that this will help you become aware of when you start to dip into those lower traits and how to kind of work with that energy to move you into the higher traits. Because like I said, that's where you want to be. That's where you're going to feel the best, is when you're in those higher expressions of both 3 and Leo. Okay, so I hope this was helpful. Thank you all so much for listening. Take care. Virgo, if you are a Virgo sun, moon, and rising, and you are a life path number 3, then this reading is for you. So we're going to take a look at the higher and the lower expressions of Virgo, and then we're going to take a look at the higher and the lower expressions of the 3, so that you can kind of see how these energies work together, how they can be a little bit challenging perhaps, and when to sort of recognize when you're in your higher and your lower expressions of both. So Virgo is an earth sign. When it's in its highest expression, we have this very humble, practical, industrious, kind energy. Virgos are very empathetic. They're usually very methodical, and they're quick thinkers. They're quick on their feet. They tend to be more hardworking and responsible, and they usually have these great big hearts. I know a lot of Virgos in my life, and they all have just tremendously big hearts. When Virgo is in its lower expression, we see this energy of being very overly critical of not only others, but of self. They become perfectionists. They are overly systematic and very rigid within their thinking and their actions. They can become pessimistic, they can be stubborn, and overly meticulous. So when we look at the energies of the three, we have this very extroverted energy, right? I would say that Virgo probably has a little bit of both, extroverted, introverted. But three energy is very extroverted. It's a very sociable energy. It's also very associated with Aries, and so it is considered a fire element. When we look at the positive traits of the three, we see very optimistic, very sociable, friendly, inspiring, idealistic, good teachers, outgoing, creative. Threes are very sociable. They're very bigger than life energy, and they're very creative when they're in their highest expression. They can be very intuitive and psychic. They're also very intelligent, and they can be very adaptable and versatile. When you get into your negative traits of the three, we see self-centeredness, moody, impulsive, hyperreactive, arrogant, tending to exaggerate things, like making big mountains out of molehills. They tend to be good starters at things, but poor finishers, and they have a lot of scattered energy in that lower expression. So we can see when we look at the higher expressions of Virgo, very practical, industrious, kind, empathetic, again, very earthy energy, very methodical and very quick thinkers, right? Which is great, very hardworking, responsible, and those big hearts. And what I love about the earth energy, the Virgo energy, coupled with this very expansive, big, creative three energy that's very social, is that it kind of, again, it grounds that energy of the three a bit. It makes it to where it gives that fire energy its fuel and helps it to be a little bit less scattered. Okay. So the Virgo energy of again, being practical, you can still be because three energy can be very idealistic, which is what people love about them, is they're very, not only idealistic, but they also have the creative wherewithal to create something, to create that idealism, right? To make it a reality. And I love that with the Virgo energy, you've got that sort of very methodical, practical energy behind you so that you can, it sort of, again, fuels that fire of creating that idealistic situation, whatever that is, right? Like threes might want to, live in a better world. So not only do they think it's possible, but they also have the power and the creativity to be able to make it happen, right? Or at least to start that process. And then if you've got that Virgo energy behind you, then you've got that more practical, methodical, again, hardworking energy that's just going to continue to push you and fuel you. So very complementary energy when we're in our highest expression of Virgo and our highest expression of the three. And also, with Virgo having being very empathetic with those big hearts, that just fuels, again, that three sociability, where it's threes usually they're very outgoing, and they usually have big networks. They usually have, lots of friends and lots of acquaintances and lots of people that they can sort of pull from if they get into a jam or if they need something. And also when they start creating things, if they need somebody who can, do the artwork or do the voiceover or whatever it is, they have people at their disposal where they can do that because they've got that outgoing, very beautiful energy, that empathetic energy that lets them relate to people rather easily. And that's just three energy within itself too, but also when you bring in that Virgo energy of empathy and having those big hearts and being very humble, right? It's those are the people that it's are a joy to work with, where it's they have this bigger than life personality, but it's also approachable energy. So very, very complementary between Virgo and threes. Now, when we get into the negative traits, right? Negative of three, again, you've got that hyperreactivity, you've got that really fire, that wounded masculine energy of arrogance, moodiness, self-centeredness, coupled with sort of this overly critical energy of perfectionism and being very rigid in their thinking for Virgo, right? If you're in a lower expression of Virgo, and being very stubborn. So you can see if you couple the lower expression of Virgo, again, overly critical, perfectionist, too systematic and rigid, overly meticulous, very stubborn, pessimistic. You couple that with those traits of the three, and you're just coming to a halt. There's just no fuel there. There's nothing, you're just miserable within your existence. You're just really angry at the world, angry at self, overly critical of the world, overly critical of self. You're just so far removed from the higher expressions of Virgo and the 3 that you just become sort of stuck in this tornado of negativity, I guess, right? And like, no, this is kind of an overgeneralization, but there's the potential for that, right? When you look at the negative expressions of both Virgo and the 3. So I will say, you just need to be mindful of when you start when you start to feel yourself being overly reactive. How do you respond to people? When someone says something that triggers you, are you reactive to it? Or do you have enough emotional maturity where you can pause, think about it, and then respond when you feel like you are prepared to do so? Does the world revolve around you? That arrogance, that self-centeredness, or are you more of that higher elevated energy of the 3 where you're more friendly and inclusive of other people and tolerant and all of those things, right? And so you can just kind of like gauge it, like how are you showing up to your experiences? How are you showing up to, to other people? Are you being overly critical? Are you, being too rigid in your thinking? Like, are you too much of an extreme? It's really hard to be that creative life force that you're meant to be as a 3 if you're too rigid, because you have to have that sort of expansive mindset, that open mind, to allow the ideas and the inspiration to come in to play with them so that you can be creative, so you can create those amazing things. So, it's not a bad thing to be in your lower expression. We fall in and out of our lower expression throughout life. It's just a matter of having the self-awareness and then doing something, figuring out like what challenge has surfaced, what is the challenge trying to show you, and what wisdom and lessons can you pull from those challenges to assist you in elevating yourself higher above these negative traits, right? Because the negative traits of both the 3 and the Virgo are not getting you anywhere, right? They're only like keeping you stuck. And so it's kind of like the fire of the 3 is burning all the kindling away of the Virgo, this lower expression, and you're just not getting anywhere. And at some point you're going to run out of fuel. So again, it's not a bad thing. It's something that we experience. We came to experience these lower traits. They are a part of us, right? It's just, again, recognizing, honoring those sides of ourselves, but then also finding some kind of way to manage that so that we can fully express and step into our higher traits. So again, Virgo energy is very, very complementary of 3 energy when it's in its highest expression. It's just when we get into the lower expressions of the energies, which is pretty much the same thing for all of the numbers and the zodiac signs. When we get into those lower expressions, it's like that's when we really start to see like how we're being held back, how, why certain challenges are surfacing, why we don't feel good about our experience or what we're doing, and it all sort of starts to make sense, right? But again, if you're in that higher expression with Virgo and you're in the higher expression of your 3, beautiful, beautiful, very complementary energy between that earth and fire energy. So I hope that this has been helpful. Thank you all so much for listening. I appreciate you. Take care. Libra, if you are Libra, sun, moon, or rising, and you are also a life path number 3, then this reading is for you. So we're going to take a look at the higher expressions of Libra and the lower expressions of Libra, as well as the higher and lower expressions of the 3, so that you can kind of see how they complement each other, how these energies might work against each other, and sort of what you have to contend to with what you signed up for in this journey. So Libra energy is, of course, air. It's an air element. When Libra is in its highest expression, we see very diplomatic energy. We see the peacemaker. People who are in their higher expression of Libra are often very fair, very idealistic, very social and friendly, very intelligent. They like to find solutions to problems, and they often do that with a lot of ease, right? Things come naturally for them to sort of see all sides of things and then come to a solution to bring people together. They can be very forgiving and very trustworthy and tactful in their approach, right? When we see the lower expression of Libra, we see sort of this moodiness, this dishonesty, indecisiveness, neediness, egotistical. They can be self-indulgent, untrustworthy, more detached, and unemotional. Some Libras, when they're in their lower expression, can be very vain and selfish. So when we look at the higher and lower expressions of the three, you will see how the higher expressions are almost like mirror images of the three energy and work very beautifully together. If you've signed up as, Libra, Sun, Moon, and Rising, and you're also a three, you came here to be, in the public sphere in some way and building those relationships and using your creativity to bring good to the world or whatever the case may be. But it's definitely about those relationships and social, that sociability, right? So when we look at the three is a very extroverted energy. It needs to be out there. It needs to be seen, be heard, be experienced, right? It's very Aries energy. So it's definitely a fire element. And, Libra energy being an air gives life to fire. And so it breathes life into fire, right? And so you can see already that it's going to be very complementary energy. So the higher expression of the three is that very optimistic, again, just like Libra, very sociable, friendly, inspiring, idealistic. See, a lot of very similarities between Libra and the three. Good teachers, very outgoing, very creative, intuitive, with good insight, very intelligent, very versatile. And so again, we see how it's just very similar energy. It's almost like when you came here, you were like, all right, I want to be a three and I also want to be a Libra. And when I'm in my highest expression, then it just compounds the energy. Like, again, it's just like people are going to be very drawn to you because they're going to feel that about your essence, that you're just very much about being fair and open and bringing people together, being very diplomatic, being able to read a room and say the right things so that what you're saying lands in a way that people can sort of internalize it and feel a sense of camaraderie with whatever it is that you're trying to sell or do or whatever the case may be. So the Libra energy, that sort of relationship energy of Libra, really fuels that fire of the three with the creativity. So you've got the three, or the Libra energy that's very relationship oriented, very outgoing. And then you've got that three energy that's also just bigger than life energy. It's, again, meant to be out there, meant to be seen. And so the Libra energy will assist the three energy in doing what it is that you came here to do, right? And so much of three energy is about creative self-expression and expressing yourself, communication, right? And so you almost have just a double dose of that energy of just being able to really communicate very well with others, to assist others in a way where they feel comfortable with you, where they're open to listening to what you have to say because of the way that you present yourself. So, and again, you've just got that double dose of sort of being very idealistic in your approach to things, and people are drawn to that. People are drawn to optimism because it's not just like, for threes, it's not just like looking through rose-colored glasses with the idealistic, sense of self. They are very much like they have that sort of idyllic, foresight, but they know how to achieve it. Like they are the ones who can create that idealism into the world, right? They can bring it into sort of an ideal situation. They can create it, right? And when you have that Libra energy, which is also idealistic, and pushing you to sort of be out in the public and be able to, present yourself to people in a way that is well responded to, right? And well received. It just works well together, very, very, very well together. So it's beautiful energy. That this energy combined is that energy that just brings people to you. I would be really surprised for you to have Libra energy, Sun, Moon, Rising, also three energy, if you're in your highest expression, not to have again, a big network, a big, opportunities that sort of put you in front of people. Maybe you're a salesperson or something like that, but what you're selling is an ideal, right? It's something that's going to make things better for people. It's something that's going to solve some kind of an issue for people and make things happen with more ease. So yeah, just I could go on and on and on about how beautiful these two energies work together. Very, very complementary, very beautiful energy. Love it. Now, when we look at the lower expressions, just like with every other sign, right, and every other number, this is where we kind of obviously run into the issues. And so with the negative traits of the 3, we see very like wounded masculine energy. It's self-centeredness, very moody, very impulsive, very hyper-reactive, arrogant. They tend to exaggerate all the time. They can be good starters at things, but they're poor finishers. So they might offer to do something for somebody and just they lose interest and it just fizzles away, and then they lose trust with that person or whatever, right? So they're good at starting things, but bad at finishing them. They would be the people who would, start a sport and end it a week later, or start, learning an instrument, lose interest and stop before they've even like gotten started. You know what I mean? Like, so that's kind of that lower energy. Very scattered energy. It's hard for them to sort of pull their energy towards one goal or one focus or a couple goals or a couple focuses. They're kind of all over the mat. And in doing that, they get very depleted very quickly. So if we look at the Libra lower expressions, again, you've got that moodiness, and that's, again, compounded with the moodiness of the 3, and then you've got dishonesty, right? And who's going to trust somebody who's indecisive, dishonest, and moody? You've got sort of this neediness or egotistical energy, self-indulgent, untrustworthy. Again, who's going to trust somebody who's dishonest and egotistical and self-indulgent? And they're more detached from their emotions, which is interesting because the 3 is such like an empathetic energy. Like they're so understanding of other people's circumstances and other people's situations. Whereas if you're in that lower expression of Libra, and you are self-indulgent and unemotional and untrustworthy and detached, then you've got that 3 lower expression, and you're arrogant and you tend to exaggerate things, right? And it's not a great mixture. It creates a lot of instability, and where people just feel like they can't be vulnerable with you and they can't trust you, and it hurts relationships, right? It hurts those experiences. And 2, like Libra energy, when it's in its lower expression, can be very selfish. It's all about that person. When you can tell it's a lower expression because Libra at its highest expression is all about those relationships, is all about bringing people together to create a more harmonious world. Then you've got that 3 energy, which is very outgoing and very just this real bubbly personality where it's like very optimistic and idealistic, and just, again, with the wherewithal and the creative influence to be able to create something that will sort of mimic that idealistic nature. So again, if you're in that lower expression, it's just not going to feel good for you. It's just going to feel like things are not moving forward, or that, if you are, this is kind of like a generalization, but it's kind of like if you're a Libra and you're also a 3, and you are very introverted, very hermit mode, like you don't have a lot of acquaintances or friends or networks, you're not really out in the public, you're not really social in any way. If you're Libra and a 3 and that's sort of your current circumstances, I would say you're probably in your lower expressions. Because again, it's just your soul actually came here. Now, again, it depends on what's in the rest of your chart, astrological chart, and your numerology report. Because there are going to be a lot of things that kind of make that up, and maybe there's a reason. But just looking at this, if you're a Libra and you're a 3 and you're like very withdrawn, sort of hermit mode, and it doesn't necessarily just have to be about the person, right? It's also about the work. You could be very introverted as a person and never leave your home. But if your work has like this bigger than life approach and like actually assists people in doing, whatever it is that you're meant to be doing, and your work is extroverted, then you're very likely in your higher expression. That's fine. But you can just kind of see how it's like 3 energy, Libra energy are meant to be experienced. They're meant to be out in the public. They're meant to have these like larger than life experiences because they're meant to help the greater good. You see what I'm saying? So anyway, there's nothing wrong with the lower expressions of ourselves. They are a part of us. We are meant to experience them. We are meant to move through them. We are meant to face challenges around them so that we can recognize when, the way that it feels when we're in our lower expression and the way that it feels when we're in our higher expression. So when we dip into that lower expression, which we often do throughout life, we're able to acquire the tools and the wisdom and the resources so that we can move out of those lower expressions much more quickly in the future, right? So not a bad thing, but if you feel like things aren't going anywhere or you just feel like, not comfortable in your own skin, then it could be that you're in your lower expression and you just need to find your way out of it. You just need to find the tools and the resources and the wisdom to help excel you out of it into those higher expressions. Because again, in the higher expression of Libra and the higher expression of the 3, these two are just like mirror reflections of each other. They just help each other significantly accomplish whatever it is that they came to accomplish. It's beautiful, beautiful energy together. It's just when we dip into those lower expressions that things get a little bit dicey, but that's okay. So I hope that this was helpful. Thank you so much for listening. Take care, everyone. Scorpio. So if you are a Scorpio sun, moon, or rising sign, and you are also a life path number 3, then this reading is for you. So we're going to take a look at the highest and the lowest expressions of Scorpio, and then we're going to do the same thing for the life path number 3, and we're going to see how these energies sort of complement one another, as well as some of the challenges you could face from sort of those lower expressions and what challenges that could come up and how the energies sort of work against each other. So let's take a look at Scorpio. So Scorpio is, of course, a water sign. When Scorpio is in its highest expression, we often see someone who's very ambitious, very determined, very brave, very loyal and honest. Scorpios are often very protective of what they hold dear to them. They can be very intuitive, very psychic. They can be very independent thinkers. So when they're in their highest expression, they are not easily influenced by outside forces, right? They have pretty much a good sense of self. They can be very assertive and emotionally have emotional depth, even if they don't show it. So there can be a lot going on under the surface there in a Scorpio. And then they can kind of have on their poker face, right? They're very deeply sensitive and passionate individuals at their highest expression, and they're able to kind of work with that energy. When we get into the lower expressions of Scorpio, we start to see stubbornness, manipulative energy, very intolerant individuals. They become jealous, they become resentful, aggressive, vengeful, possessive. They have a lack of trust in others or society or whatever the case may be. They lack vulnerability. They're unable to be vulnerable around other people. They become moody and hypersensitive. So if we take a look at the 3 energy, we can see how the higher expressions of Scorpio work really, really well with the 3 energy, and how the lower expressions really sort of add fuel to the fire of the 3 lower expressions, right? So let's take a look at the 3. So 3 is an extroverted energy. It's very out there, it in its core, it wants to be seen, heard, experienced. It's a larger than life energy. And it's also a very creative energy. It's got a lot of creative life force flowing through it, and it knows how to use it. And so it is a fire element. It's more associated with sort of Aries energy. Very fire, very, again, just out there, ambitious, sort of in your face, but also just this very beautiful, loving energy with 3s. They're very sociable, and so people are very drawn to them. So when they're in their highest expression, they don't rub people the wrong way just because of their innate ability to relate to other people. And so the highest expression, or the positive traits of the 3, we see optimism, sociability, friendliness, inspiring other people to do things, They're very idealistic. They are good teachers. They're outgoing. They're creative. They're very intuitive with good insight. They are also very intelligent and versatile. And so we can see how those higher expressions really complement those scorpionic traits of ambition, determination, loyalty, honesty, intuitive psychic energy, being an independent thinker. As a 3, it is so important to not be easily influenced by other people or by society, because again, it's just this larger than life energy, and a lot of times 3s struggle with fully being themselves authentically because they are such larger than life personalities. And so they'll often make themselves smaller, but they're meant to have these larger than life personalities to attract a big crowd, to be able to share that idealistic insight and sort of those thoughts and that optimism with people, to lift the consciousness, right? To lift the experience of the consciousness. And so if they were more meek and mild, they would have a hard time doing that, basically, right? And if they're easily influenced, then they're not allowing, then they fall to an extreme, right? They fall into whatever society wants them to be, when really the 3 is meant to be that creative life force, right? Like allow it to flow through them, create that idealism, right? Create that optimistic future, whatever the case may be. And so it helps to have that scorpionic energy of being an independent thinker and also being sort of assertive, right? Like not to the point where you are, again, sort of being invasive, but to the point where you are not afraid to share your thoughts, your ideas, your creative insights with the world and see how that's received, right? But you kind of lose any self-doubt or hesitancy in expressing yourself in the way that you're meant to express yourself as a 3. So it's actually really, really beautiful energy. Also, that sort of psychic, intuitive energy is so beautiful with the 3 energy, because again, you are meant to follow that inner compass as a 3, because that's where you're getting your insights. That's where you're getting your the downloads for what to do next, like what to create, right? That's where your creative influence comes from, is from within your soul, and with that intuitive sort of innate ability. We all have that, but 3s are a little bit, and Scorpios are a little bit more sensitive to it and tuned into it. So they're able to work with it usually much more quickly than the rest of the population who might not have those influences. So anyway, if you have that scorpionic energy, then it's kind of like fueling that fire to be like, yeah, follow your intuition, follow those psychic, downloads that you get to assist you in creating that ideal world, to creating that ideal situation, to creating whatever it is that would help the population, right? Or help your family or help the greater community, whatever the case may be. But it's actually really beautiful. It couples very, very nicely with the 3 energy. And that sensitivity that Scorpios have, right? Not only being sensitive emotionally, but sensitive to what's going on around them, right? Like they're very, they're really good observers at, to see like what's happening. What do I need to be aware of? What do I need to take action on? What do I need to hold off on? They're very sensitive to that as well. And that's helpful with the 3 also, because oftentimes we see 3s, like I said, either their work is in the public sphere, or they themselves as an actor or actress, whatever, are in the public sphere. And so they need to be aware of sort of who they're attracting, who's coming into their surroundings, what do those people bring to their experience? What are they detracting from their experience? How can they work with it? You know what I mean? All that stuff. So you can see how Scorpio, the higher expressions of Scorpio, really assist them. Even the bravery of Scorpio, right? That ambitious, that determination, that bravery of the higher expression of Scorpio really assists the 3 to be like, you know what? I'm going to be who I am in all of my glory. Those who, can handle me will be attracted to me and come into my experience. Those who think I'm too much won't participate, and that's okay, right? So it just gives you this level of confidence and courage to be who it is that you signed up to be in this lifetime, right? And so when we look at the lower expressions of Scorpio and the lower expressions of the three, we start to see how things can get really, I don't know, I guess the word aggressive is probably the best word to use for this, but how that you can start to really repel people, how you can start to repel ideas and the creativity and all those things that you signed up for as a Scorpio and a 3 to accomplish in this lifetime. You start to really hold yourself back and to alienate yourself. And so again, for the lower expressions of Scorpio, we see stubbornness, manipulation, intolerance, jealousy, resentfulness, being aggressive, vengeful, possessive, lack of trust, lack of vulnerability, and that moodiness and hypersensitivity. When we look at the negative traits of the 3, we see self-centeredness, moodiness, impulsivity, hyper-reactive, arrogance, tending to exaggerate, good at starting things but bad at finishing things, and scattered energy. And so again, if we have those lower expressions of Scorpio fueling those negative experiences of the 3, it just becomes like this aggressive hurricane of emotions and energies and hyperreactivity and exaggeration. And you can kind of see how you would get thrown into an extreme, and it would be kind of challenging to get out of it. And so I really feel like for the negative traits of both Scorpio and the 3 are very internal. So it's kind of, again, it's like the storm is created within you, and that hyperreactivity of the 3 is what brings it into the external. And so then you start to see your experiences mimic that internal tornado. And so it's really just about finding ways to mitigate that energy, to work with that energy, to, if you start to see yourself, not trusting in people, not trusting yourself, not trusting the universe, not trusting, society as a whole, whatever the case is, if you become overly cynical, and aggressive and resentful and those really lower energy, there's just a lower vibe to it. If you start falling into that, or that stubbornness, or you try to manipulate people, or whatever the case may be, then you can know that you're in your lower expression of Scorpio. And that is only going to fuel that fire of the lower expressions of the 3 into that hyperreactivity. So now you start bringing that vengefulness, aggressiveness, resentfulness into the external world. You start actually reacting and actually taking that to the next level. And so it can get really, it can get a little scary, right? It can get a little bit challenging for you. And you may take action on things that you will regret later. And so I will say that, our negative traits, our lower expressions of these energies, we signed up for them. We wanted to experience them. We wanted to learn about that side of ourselves in human form, right? So they're not bad things. They are just, you can use some of those things to fuel your fire, to move you forward. But when it's in an extreme, or when you're fully in it, it can create a lot of havoc, right? So it's really important not to shame yourself if you're in a negative trait, right? To experience it and to recognize, hey, I don't feel good. I don't like how I'm treating other people. I don't like how I'm treating myself. I don't like how I'm not going after my goals. I don't like how I don't trust the world enough to where it's keeping me kind of like a recluse, right? Because again, as a 3 especially, you are meant to be out there, be seen, be heard, be experienced. And so if you are, again, just full of rage and anger and resentment and all of those lower vibes against yourself or against another person, then you can probably recognize that you are in your lower expression of either Scorpio or your 3 or both. And when you're in your lower expression of both, it is just going to be compounded, right? So again, it's not a bad thing. You're meant to experience it. You're meant to understand, and recognize through self-awareness when you've fallen into those lower expressions. And then you're meant to start doing the work to figure out how to elevate yourself, how to move beyond it, how to transmute that energy. Not saying that that's necessarily going to be easy, but when you figure out how to do that, you acquire the tools and the wisdom and the resources to be able to continue to do that throughout your life, because we'll always dip in and out of our lower expressions, right? That's where the challenges are. That's where the learning curve is. That's where the lessons are. So it's not a bad thing. But you can easily see how those negative traits and falling into them will hinder your fully stepping into your 3 or fully stepping into your Scorpio energy and utilizing, those resources of those energies to accomplish whatever it is that your higher self, your soul has chosen to accomplish in this lifetime. So it behooves you to figure out how to move into those higher expressions, and you'll just feel better when that happens, right? So hopefully this will help you to recognize the two, the different levels and what it feels like when you're in those experiences and how to move into the higher expressions, because the higher expression of Scorpio and the higher expression of 3 are beautiful, beautiful energies, and they complement each other so incredibly well. Now, when you get into the lower expression of that water Scorpio sign and the lower expression of the 3, you can put the fire out of the 3 from the water of the Scorpio, right? Or that fire of the 3 can, completely dehydrate the Scorpio, right? Like just kind of like, evaporate that water. So it's just a balancing act, and it's figuring out what works for you and what feels good for you. And once you can do that, then you can work with the energy as you continue to move through your journey. So I hope that this was helpful. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you again soon. Sagittarius, if you are a Sagittarius sun, moon, or rising, and you are also a life path number 3, then this reading is for you. So we're going to take a look at the higher and the lower expressions of Sag, as well as the higher and lower expressions of the 3, and see how these energies complement each other, as well as where they can kind of work against each other. So Sagittarius is a fire element. When Sagittarius is in its highest expression, we see these freedom lovers who are very optimistic, honest, intelligent, have a good sense of humor, are fair-minded, they're spontaneous and fun, they're very adaptable to change, they're very enthusiastic and generous, and they're very playful. It's a very playful energy. When Sag is in its lower expression, we see impatience, being blunt without a filter. So they'll sort of tell you how it is, no matter how undiplomatic it may seem, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But, sometimes you need to be able to read the room, and you need to be able to sort of filter your words in a way that will not alienate you and that will sort of land on your audience in a way that they can integrate the information, right? So sometimes it helps you to be diplomatic. In its lower expression, Sagittarius will often promise more than they can deliver. And this can create stress and anxiety, not only for the Sagittarian, but for everybody else involved, right? So they can be inconsistent, emotionally distant, and also reckless in their behavior. They seem to sometimes bore easily when they're in their lower expressions. And so what's interesting is if we look at the 3, we also have a fire sign. 3 energy is more associated with Aries energy, so it's very similar to Aries energy. It's very extroverted. It's larger than life. It's meant to be seen, heard, experienced. It's very creative energy. There's a lot of creative life force flowing through 3s. When 3s are in their positive traits, we see, again, optimism, sociability, friendliness, idealistic energy, good at explaining things, so they make really good teachers. They're very outgoing, they're very creative, they're very intuitive and very intelligent and versatile. So you can see how the positive attributes of the Sagittarian really influences the 3, right? The Sagittarians are freedom lovers, right? So they like that expansiveness, that freedom of thought, of expression, which just fuels the fire for the 3, right? The 3 is that creative energy. They don't like to be restricted. They don't like to be restricted in their expression, in their thoughts, in their creativity, any of that stuff. And so when you have Sag energy, then that is fueling that passion, right? That need for expression. Sagittarians are very optimistic, and so are 3s. So again, if you're in that higher octave, then you are very optimistic. It's hard to kind of get you down or beat you down. You're very optimistic about like, okay, well, this didn't work out, but there's something better around the corner, and I'm willing to hang out and work towards whatever that is. They don't give up easily. They're very optimistic. They're also very intelligent. They seem to have a good sense about themselves, right? They also have a good sense of humor, and they're fair-minded. And so all of this bleeds into the 3 energy in a beautiful way, because again, 3 energy is very sociable. It's very friendly. It's very, it likes to sort of be in the public eye, or it's just a very social energy. And so again, it's like if you have that good sense of humor and that fair-mindedness and that honesty, and that spontaneity and funness of the Sag energy, that just, again, it just complements that 3 energy to where it's like you're just going to be drawing people to you like a, moth to a light, right? It's like people are just going to be drawn to that energy. It's just those are the people that most people want to hang out with, right? That most people want to surround themselves with, are those really fair-minded people who aren't going to be judgmental, but that are spontaneous and fun and like, social and up for whatever, you know what I mean? And just optimistic. It's just a very, just beautiful energy to work with. Now, where we can see things sort of unravel here a little bit or become a little bit more challenging, right, is when we fall into the lower expressions. So for the lower expressions of the 3, we see self-centeredness, moodiness, impulsivity, hyper-reactive. They become arrogant or tend to exaggerate things and just, blame people or make mountains out of molehills. So it just becomes like this energy where it's like very aggressive energy, where like it's the world's out to get them and they can do no wrong, but the rest of the world will pay for their actions, right? It just becomes this very self-centered energy where they can't possibly see where their actions have contributed to the downfall or whatever is occurring, right? There's a lot of blame placing. And so when we go to the lower expressions of Sag and we have that impatience, right? We have that bluntness, the sort of promising more than you can deliver, right? And then moving into the 3 lower expression and blaming the other people for your inability to deliver on what you promised, right? And so again, it just becomes this ball of, I don't know, it kind of feels like victimhood, right? It's kind of like, everything is happening to me and nobody is taking accountability for their actions that they took towards me, right? And like, I've done no wrong. And they just become like very emotionally distant or reckless in their behavior. And you can see how that, for one, is very like the polar opposite of what a 3 really embodies and like what is at the core of their, their energy when they're in their higher expression, and how it can really stagnate that person. It can keep them from like building relationships. It can actually really hurt relationships. And 3 energy is all about like communication, like, being able to like easily communicate with people and work with people and, take responsibility and accountability for their own actions in the situation so that they can show up authentically and with some empathy towards the situation to kind of heal the situation, right? But if you're in your lower expressions of both Sagittarius and the 3, you can see how it's just like this, it becomes very self-absorbed. It becomes this like, the world is out to get me. You probably become very reclusive, very withdrawn, very angry, dealing with some of those emotions that come up for you. You just become very sort of nearsighted. And that's just not 3 energy. Like 3 energy is very expansive energy. It's very, like I said, it's all about like being in the public and working with the public in a way that draws the public to them, So you can see how the lower expressions will just make you feel really, really uncomfortable. And so if you are in a situation where it seems like the world is happening around you and you just, just find offense to everything that's said, done, around you or to you or whatever, regardless of what the intention was, you could be in that hyper-reactive state of the 3, the lower expression. And, if you're moody, if just everything sets you off and you just don't feel like you have control over it, you feel very Again, like impulsive or whatever the case may be, you might be in the lower expressions of the Sagittarius and the three. And again, the lower expressions are not a bad thing. They are part of who we are. They're part of the experience we came to this planet to experience, right? And so they're not a bad thing. They are the teachers of who we are. And so when we fall into those lower expressions, there's something there we're meant to learn about ourselves, about society, about the experience that we are currently in. There's something there to be learned. It's up to us, how much effort we put into actually learning whatever it is that's trying to be shown to us. But we'll see that through the challenges that surface. And it's through those challenges that it will highlight for us where we're in our lower expression. And then we work to overcome and transmute that energy so that in the future, when we dip into that lower expression, which we will do, that's part of life, we have the resources, the wisdom, the wherewithal to be able to elevate ourselves, right? To pull ourselves out of that lower expression and into the higher expression of the energy. And again, it's like when we're in the higher expression, we're just going to feel better, right? We're just going to feel better. And it's not necessarily like you are either in the higher expression or you're in the lower expression. You can be a little in, a little out, right? And so, a little in the higher expression, a little in the lower expression. And things just won't feel balanced. They won't feel whole to you. Things will feel off. And that's okay. Like I said, you're going to be able to eventually, as you continue to move through it, figure out which of that lower octave is sort of plaguing you at this moment. What are you meant to learn from the experience, and how can you move through it so that you can move back up into a higher elevation and fully experience that 3 or that Sagittarius energy at its fullest? Because again, Sag is fire, 3 is fire, they fuel each other, right? But if they are in their lower expressions, then it's going to be a fire out of control, a raging fire out of control. And that can be a lot to work with. That's a very powerful force to work with. That can be very destructive. So again, hopefully this is helpful to kind of give you an idea of like sort of what your higher octaves are and what you're sort of meant to step into, and what it would sort of feel like if you're in your lower octaves, and what those sort of look like so that you can be aware of them. And again, not a bad thing to be in those lower expressions. You're meant to learn something from it, to gain something from it. And so they're there to assist you. You're just not meant to stay in it. You know what I mean? So again, hopefully this was helpful. Thank you all so much for listening, and I will see you again soon. Capricorn, if you are a Capricorn sun, moon, or rising, and you are also a life path number 3, then this reading is for you. We're going to take a look at the Capricorn higher expression and the lower expression, as well as the higher and lower expressions of the 3. We're going to see how those energies complement each other and how they can kind of work against each other and some of the challenges you could face. So let's take a look at Capricorn. So Capricorn is a earth element. When Capricorn is in its highest expression, we see this energy of being very ambitious, very persistent, practical, disciplined, highly sensitive, responsible, self-disciplined, very patient, organized, very wise, reliable, creative, and loyal. When we look at the lower expressions of Capricorn, we see this energy of like being very cynical, selfish, unforgiving, sort of holding a grudge, perfectionist energy, egotistical energy, being that of a loner, overly cautious, pessimistic, and rarely satisfied. Like no matter what they accomplish, it's not good enough, right? They need more. So when we look at the higher and lower expressions of the 3, we can start to see how, again, these energies either complement each other or can kind of hold you back. And you'll have to figure out your balance between them, right? Now, 3 energy is very extroverted energy. It's larger than life. It wants to be seen, heard, and experienced. It's very creative energy. It's also associated with Aries, and it's a fire element. So it's very fire. In the positive traits of the 3, we see optimism, sociability, friendliness, being very inspiring to others, idealistic, outgoing, creative, very intuitive, intelligent and versatile. So you can kind of see how the earth energy of the Capricorn sort of gives legs to or grounds the fire energy of the 3, but not so much to where it debilitates it. The Capricorn energy is going to give the 3 the ambition that it needs, the sort of practical mindset that it may need to be able to work with people in a way that they can understand, in a way that they can work with. Capricorn energy is very disciplined energy. So when 3 is in its lower expression, I'm going to talk about that in a moment, but when it's in its lower expression, it can be very scattered. It can have a hard time sticking to something that it started, which can cause issues, obviously, because it's such a extroverted energy. It's meant to, like I said, be sort of in the public sphere in some way or impacting the public in some way. And so that discipline of the Capricorn can really assist the 3 to stay focused. And so again, it's really kind of grounding that or containing that fire energy, not to extinguish it, but to, again, give it sort of legs so that it can move in a very intentional way. And so, again, with Capricorns being so organized, that energy of organization, right, that really will assist the 3 in its creativity. Because again, the 3 energy is so creative that it can kind of feel like you're in the cosmos most of the time, that you're not really in your physical body. And so that Capricorn energy is meant to sort of balance that out and bring you back to the present, bring you back to the material plane, where you're meant to sort of create the things that will allow for those more idealistic thoughts that you have about the future, right? And the more like optimistic viewpoints that you have of the future. Instead of just looking at the world through rose-colored glasses, your Capricorn energy is going to assist you in actually being focused and dedicated into creating what it is that you want to see. So it's very practical, very dedicated and reliable energy. And like I said, it just really fuels the fire of the 3, but in a way that like keeps you on course, right? Like it keeps you, because 3s can have like a million different ideas come in. It can feel sort of very frenetic at times for 3s to kind of not knowing what to do with all that creative energy. And so the Capricorn energy of your sun, moon, or rising is assisting you on like laying down the tracks and staying on those tracks until you reach your goal, right? So it influences the 3 very positively in its highest expression, very much so. It gives you that practical experience that you sort of need to, again, ground all of those big ideas that are coming in and to work with it in a practical way, okay? So it's actually a really beautiful energy. Now, when we look at the lower expression of the 3, we see very kind of like wounded masculine energy of like self-centeredness, moodiness, impulsivity, hyperreactivity, being arrogant, this tendency to exaggerate things, like making things bigger than they really are, or like more devastating than they really are, or whatever the case may be, and really just throwing themselves into sort of victim mentality. So when we couple that with the lower expressions of the Capricorn, we can see how it's like you could become way too grounded. Like the Capricorn energy, it's like throwing too much earth over that fire and extinguishing it. So again, with the lower expressions of Capricorn, we have that being cynical, being selfish, unforgiving, perfectionist, egotistical, a loner, being overly cautious, pessimistic, and rarely satisfied. So again, you've got this like overly cautious earth energy and this loner energy that's like sort of forcing you to stay small and not step into that bigger than life 3 energy that you are meant to step into, right? And then you couple that with the moodiness and impulsivity and reactionary energy of the 3, the lower expression of the 3. And again, you just become this like cynical person who doesn't step outside their comfort zone because they're overly cautious. And now you become a loner and you're not really accomplishing anything that you set forth to accomplish within that 3 sphere, right? Or even within that Capricornian sphere, because again, the Capricorn wants to achieve. It is very persistent in setting a goal and reaching that goal. And with the 3, you just have that creative energy that you're meant to harness and do something with. So you can see how it's like you would get that creative life force would get stagnant very quickly. And if you become a loner, you're not utilizing any of those 3 traits that make you a 3, which is again like that sociability, being friendly, being optimistic, and outgoing. So again, it's like you can think of like the lower expression of Capricorn, the way it mixes with the lower expression of the 3, as really just shoveling a bunch of dirt on top of your fire and extinguishing it and putting it out to where you're not making any progression. You're not making any forward momentum. And then you start to get really angry at the world and at yourself for being stagnant and not accomplishing what you want to accomplish. But really has a lot to do with the reality that you're creating through the traits that you are feeding into, right? So again, if you're in that lower expression, for you as a 3, things will sort of stagnate pretty quickly. Things will halt, right? You won't see any progression. You won't see things moving. You'll feel like things are just become very stagnant. And for 3 energy, that's not good, because again, you've got that creative life force that's just flowing through you, and so many ideas and inspirations should be coming in for you. And if they're not, you may be in that lower expression. So the lower expression, of course, is not a bad thing. It's something that we experience, throughout our lifetimes. We came here to experience these specific traits to teach us specific things. So if you find yourself sort of in this kind of experience, where you're in the lower expression, it's not a bad thing. It's just the awareness of it, and then working towards figuring out the lesson that you're meant to learn, what it's trying to show you, and the wisdom that you can pull from the experience, so that in the future, if you find yourself here again, you can sort of elevate yourself a bit more quickly and move on to the next thing, right? Because you're going to feel your best when you are in your highest expression of Capricorn and your highest expression of the 3. And you're going to feel your worst when you're in those lower expressions, right? But again, that's where the lessons are. That's where the growth is. So you're going to find yourself there throughout life. It's just being aware of it and figuring out how to transmute that energy. So I hope that this was helpful in giving you sort of an idea of what those higher expressions and lower expressions look like, so that you can become aware of them and figure out how to work through them and make them work for you. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye for now. Aquarius, if you are Aquarius, Sun, Moon, or Rising, and you are also a life path number 3, then this reading is for you. So we're going to look at the highest expressions and the lowest expressions of Aquarius, as well as the higher and lower expressions of the 3, so that you can kind of see how they complement each other, how they work together, how they might work against each other, so that you can best work with those energies that you signed up for in this lifetime. So Aquarius is an air element. And when we see Aquarians in their highest expression, they are very adaptable to change. They are esoteric, they are smart, creative, friendly, independent, free-spirited, and unconventional, which is beautiful energy when we couple that with the 3. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. They're very honest and devoted, positive in their outlook. They can be very optimistic, very passionate, very reliable. They can be mysterious. They can be freedom seekers, right? They don't want to feel contained or restricted. When we look at the lower expression of Aquarius, we see sort of like this short attention span, this lack of focus, this lack of empathy, unpredictability. They become stubborn and extremist. They can be aloof. They can be pessimistic. They can be over rebellious and impatient. And now when we look at the energies of the 3, I'm going to tie these together so you can kind of see how they work together. 3 energy is very extroverted, which I would also say Aquarian energy is pretty extroverted in how it shows up in the world, right? Doesn't necessarily mean that the person has to be, but like how they show up, the work that they do is pretty extroverted. 3 energy is very extroverted. It's very larger than life. Again, it needs to be seen, heard, and experienced. It's very creative energy. It's associated with, in astrology, it's very much associated with Aries energy. So it is a fire element. When we look at the positive traits of the 3, we see optimism, being very sociable, friendly, inspiring, idealistic, outgoing, creative, very intuitive, intelligent, and versatile, right? So if we look at those two higher octave traits for the Aquarius and for the 3, we see a lot of similarities. We see the beautiful adaptability of the Aquarius energy really complements the 3 energy, because 3 energy, in order to be creative, in order to deal with the highs and the lows of being a creative, right? Like creating something and having it not work, or having to change direction or go on a different detour, right? Instead of getting derailed, to become very adaptable. So that Aquarian energy is really assisting in that process. We also see sort of that creative energy of Aquarius, as well as being a free-spirited and unconventional thinker, really assists the 3, because again, so much about the 3 energy is about creativity and creative self-expression. So it's like if you're sort of inhibited by your thoughts, by what the world expects of you, you're not going to be as creative as you would be if you were unconventional in those thoughts. Because again, it's like if you pigeonhole yourself by what society thinks you should be, then that's how you're going to show up in trying to replicate that, or trying to create something that is acceptable by society or by other people. But really, for 3 energy, because it's so creative, creation is messy, right? Creation is not meant to be perfect. There's meant to be like highs and lows, and like you just make a mess before it all comes together. And so that unconventionalness, that unconventional energy of Aquarius really assists the 3 in doing their work uninhibited, right? Which is beautiful, beautiful complementary energy. And also, you've got that the Aquarius energy is also very positive and optimistic, and can be highly idealistic. And so what's beautiful about the Aquarian energy and the 3 together is that 3 is going to create that ideal situation. They have it within them to be able to see things in an optimistic viewpoint, and be very idealistic in that viewpoint, and actually create that ideal situation. And so if you're coupling that with the Aquarian energy of that positive outlook and optimistic, it's going to continue to allow you to keep moving forward and keeping your optimism about you, no matter what kind of falls in your path, right? Whatever kind of obstacles you face. So again, it's just kind of like the Aquarius energy kind of becomes this really like loud, beautiful cheerleader to the 3 energy, and assisting you in stepping into it full force, right? Like full force ahead, and not really giving a crap about what anybody else thinks about how you show up. Because that's a big thing with 3s. They're so larger than life. Their energy can be so larger than life that they often will try to minimize who they are, what they do, their personality, because they don't want to be seen as like an outsider or weird or unconventional. They want to fit in, right? And they probably spend a lot of their time trying to fit in until they realize they're not meant to fit in. That is very similar to Aquarius energy. Is Aquarians are not meant to fall into the mold. They always feel like they're outsiders looking in, like they're just visiting here, right? But they have something beautiful to contribute to the whole. They're just not meant to be necessarily a part of the whole, because what they're meant to create is meant to be different than the norm. It's meant to be unconventional. It's meant to be something that the world hasn't seen before, perhaps, right? It's very inventive energy. And so that Aquarius energy kind of, again, cheers that 3 energy on to be like, we're not meant to be conventional. We're not meant to fit the mold. We're meant to be outside of it. We're meant to like use all these creative life force energies to create that ideal, to create what we want to see, right? To live optimistically in the world and create that optimism. So it's really beautiful, powerful, complementary energy. And you can probably feel that, right? And you probably feel even more so if you have Aquarius energy, sun, moon, rising, and a 3. You probably feel like an outsider even more so than most 3s, because Aquarius often feels that way. But again, it's not a bad thing. You're not meant to fall into you're meant to be larger than life, right? And people have something that they can really pull from that experience with you. That's why it's such a social energy, because you inspire other people through your unconventionality. So it's really beautiful. Now, when we get into the lower expressions, this is where we can kind of see things get a little bit tricky. So the negative traits of the 3 are self-centeredness, moodiness, impulsivity, hyperreactiveness, being arrogant, tending to exaggerate things, right? Also being a good starter at things, but a poor finisher. So you start something and you fail to finish it because you just have your hands in 10 million different pots. 3s in their lower expression can have a lot of scattered energy and can feel really frenetic. And you look at the lower expressions again of the Aquarius energy, and again, short attention span, lack of focus. Those are things that can really feed into each other. If you're in your lower expression of Aquarius and your lower expression of 3, you're just going to feel really depleted. You're going to feel like you are just turning the wheel, like a hamster on the wheel, right? Not going anywhere, but expending a lot of energy. And if that's happening for you, then you need to take a look at, where are you expending your energy? How many things are you trying to focus on? How many things are you putting your energy into that none of them can possibly come to fruition because there's not enough energy behind it to make it happen, right? And so if you're feeling that way, it could be that you're in that lower expression of both Aquarius and your 3. And if that's the case, you're just not going to go anywhere. You're just going to keep putting in all this energy to stay in the same place, and you're not going to see anything coming to fruition. So it sort of forces you to hone things in a little bit, to rein back in the bunnies, right? Put the bunnies back in their cages and create that focus for yourself, right? Like figure out, okay, what's the priority? What do I need to focus on? And really kind of try to do that. Not by restricting yourself, but by figuring out like where are you most passionate in this moment, and what should you be putting your energy towards. Also, there's this pessimism that comes in with the lower expression of Aquarius. And, again, as for the 3, you're just sort of like innately optimistic. And so if you start to become really pessimistic, then you're in your lower expression. Then you know that like there's something wrong. Like if you don't constantly have that eternal flame of hope, then there's something, you're in a lower expression. Because again, it's just like what you're capable of, where the bar is set is at the optimism, right? Like knowing that something better is just around the corner and you just need to keep going to find it. So again, really, I think the things that really stand out the most about the lower expression of Aquarius and how that feeds into the lower expression of the 3 is just that scattered energy, that short attention span. I mean, and that pessimism, right? You can become very unpredictable. You can, become stubborn and become an extremist. And those are all going to affect your progression forward and what you came here to do. But again, there's lessons to be learned through those lower expressions. So there's nothing bad about the lower expressions that we find ourselves in. It's simply they're there to be experienced. We came to experience them. They're going to show us something. And the more that we can figure out how to work through them and acquire the knowledge and the wisdom through those experiences, then we are able to transmute that energy and elevate ourselves much more quickly in the future. So it's all for our higher, our greater good and all that stuff. So it's not a bad thing. If you're in a lower expression of yourself, it's fine. You're going to find yourself there throughout life. It's part of the journey. It's just a matter of recognizing it for what it is, and then working towards elevating yourself out of it and transmuting that energy. And then when it happens in the future, you have the tools to be able to do it much more quickly, because you will feel your best when you are in your highest expression of both Aquarius and the 3. But that doesn't happen overnight, and it's not meant to. So And like I said, you'll fall in and out of those lower expressions all throughout life. It's just a matter of that's where the lessons are, that's where the challenges are, that's where the soul growth is. So, but hopefully this will help you to kind of see the different expressions and kind of recognize them for yourself when you're in them, okay? But overall, Aquarius energy is that air that fuels the fire for the 3. It's just beautiful, beautiful energy when it's at its highest expression, and they work beautifully together. So your soul did good if you chose Aquarius and 3 energy to work with. It's beautiful. So I hope this has been helpful. Thank you so much for listening. Take care. Pisces, if you are a Pisces sun, moon, or rising, and you are also a life path number 3, then this reading is for you. So we're going to look at the higher and lower expressions of Pisces, as well as the higher and lower expressions of the 3, so that you can get an idea of how these energies work together, how they complement each other, and how they can even work against each other, and how you'll have to find your balance when you're in those lower expressions. So Pisces is a water sign. And when Pisces is in its highest expression, we see someone who's very highly adaptable, who's a visionary, who's kind and gentle, who's highly intuitive and often very psychic. Pisces are often very creative. They're generally empathetic. They can be generous, emotionally mature, and very laid back and agreeable. When Pisces are in their lower expression, we see sort of like this overly emotional person who is hypersensitive, overly trusting, and sort of easily swayed or influenced by external forces. They can be closed off emotionally and sort of naive to the world around them or the circumstances. They can have sort of a victim mentality that can keep them stuck, and they can be moody. So when we look at the higher expressions of the 3, we can see how they really complement each other, the Pisces energy and the 3 energy. And when we look at the lower expressions, we're going to see how those lower expressions really work in tandem to keep you stuck, okay? So for the 3 is an extroverted energy. It is larger than life. It wants to be seen, be heard, be experienced. It is very creative energy. It's very communicative energy. It's usually out in the public in some way, or the 3's work is out in the public in some way. 3 energy is associated mostly with Aries energy. It's very similar to Aries energy. It is a fire element. So again, it's got this fire ambition, right? It is when it's in its positive traits, 3 energy is very optimistic. It's very sociable. It's very friendly, inspiring, idealistic. It's a good teacher. It's very outgoing. It's very creative, intuitive, very intelligent, and very versatile. So again, when we couple the Pisces higher octave traits with the higher octave traits of the 3, we see how compatible they are. Pisces is very adaptable. 3s need to be very adaptable because so much of their work is about creativity. Creating something that is assisting in creating that idealistic view, right? Like what they want to see in the world. Being able to adapt to the changes or the things that don't work when you're creating something, right? Like creation is messy. So it's like you have to be highly adaptable so that you can keep that optimism, so that you can keep going. Pisces are visionaries. And so again, you need that visionary energy to listen to your intuition, right? And to follow those insights that come in for you. And even when they're outside of the box, because that's the thing, most things that a 3 is going to create or contribute to is going to be outside of the box. It's going to be something that hasn't been done before. It's going to be something that is working towards that ideal situation, right? So they need to be that visionary. And so that Pisces energy assists them in that. Pisces are also kind and gentle, and 3s are also kind and gentle. They are very outgoing individuals, and typically when they're in their highest expression, they are great at networking. They're great at working with people. They're great at, people just feel drawn to them because of their optimism, because of their outlook, because of what they're doing, right? What they're creating. Threes typically, when they're in their highest expression, won't have an issue getting clients or working with people because people are so drawn to their energy. And that Pisces energy of kindness and gentleness and empathy really assists them in being able to relate to people in a very human way, right? And like in a higher soul elevated way as well. And then again, Pisces being very highly intuitive and psychic, threes are also very intuitive and have very good insight. And so again, it just complements the energy very, very well. It just adds to that, just kind of compounds it. And again, with Pisces being more laid back and agreeable, I think that kind of calms the three energy a little bit. So it's kind of like you've got this like more laid back energy of Pisces and this fire energy of the three, and it doesn't extinguish the fire of the three. It just makes it a little bit more agreeable, all right? It makes it you still have that passion of the fire, right? And of Aries, but it just makes you a little bit more laid back so that you don't burn yourself out, which is beautiful, very complementary. Now, if we look at the lower expressions of three, we see self-centeredness, moodiness, impulsivity, hyperreaction, being arrogant, tending to exaggerate things. And so it's just this very like almost like wounded masculine energy. It can be very aggressive. When we look at the lower expressions of Pisces, it's like overly emotional, hypersensitivity, overly trusting, and easily swayed or influenced. We see almost like this wounded feminine energy coming in. So they become closed off emotionally. They become a victim mentality or moody or whatever. So you have like these two forces coming together. If you're in your lower expression of your three and your lower expression of your Pisces, you have these two forces coming together, which is very much, again, wounded masculine coming head to head with wounded feminine. And it's going to be very hard to work with that energy. It's going to feel like a push and pull. It's going to feel like this dynamic that you can't sort of satiate. It's just very difficult energy to work with because each side of yourself is not seeing the needs of the other side of yourself. And so again, it becomes this push-pull energy. And one of them is going to become more dominant. And then you're going to see that sort of create the experience in your external world. So you may become more dominant in the wounded masculine energy of like the hyperreactivity, the arrogance, the exaggeration, the moodiness, the self-centeredness, right? The impulsivity, and that can have repercussions. Or you might become more dominant in the lower expression of the feminine, the wounded feminine, where it's like hypersensitive, overly emotional, overly trusting, right? Where you get yourself in a situation where you sign a contract and you're bound to this person for like whatever, and it's not healthy for you, right? Whether it's business, relationship, whatever. Or the victim mentality, where it's like the world, why is this happening to me? The world is against me. If you couple that victim mentality of the Pisces energy with the hyper-reactive, arrogant, sort of vengeful energy or aggressive energy of the three, then you have a situation where it's like you're just out to get everyone because everyone is against you and you're the victim. You see what I'm saying? So it becomes quite intense, actually, or it could become quite intense. So you almost are like constantly pushing and pulling against yourself. Now, I will say that the negative traits are not a bad thing. This is something I say in every reading because they're not a bad thing. You signed up for these experiences, right? You signed up to experience these negative traits, these sides of yourself that sort of will hinder your progress or will create your experience so that you can see how that feels, right? Like it's not going to feel good. It's going to feel very challenging. It will literally feel like the water of the Pisces is trying to put out the fire of the three, or the fire of the three is trying to evaporate the water of the Pisces. You see what I'm saying? It's like this constant, like, yeah, just tug of war or like clashing of the titans from within. And so, but again, there's something to be learned there. There's something to be experienced, something to pull from those challenges, those experiences, because whatever it's trying to show you is trying to elevate you into the higher expression of yourself. but you can't really get to the higher expression until you've worked through the lower expression. So again, you're going to experience those lower expressions. And it's not a bad thing. It's something, it's kind of like it equalizes the experience, right? And so you're going to fall into those lower expressions throughout your lifetime. It's not something where it's like you master it and then you never revisit it. You're going to see them again. Again, that's where the lessons are. That's where the growth is. That's where the challenges are. That's how our soul expands, right? And so we came here to experience those. So don't beat yourself up if you're in a lower expression. It's okay. It will be uncomfortable though. It will be very uncomfortable until you can figure out how to transmute that energy, work with it, and then elevate yourself. But that's all part of the process, right? So I think that overall, Pisces energy is very, very complementary to the 3 when they're both in their highest expression. And you may be in some areas in your higher expression of your 3 in Pisces, of course, while you're still in some of the lower expressions at the same time. It's usually not like all or nothing. But you'll recognize when you're in that lower expression, right? And it just won't feel right. Something will feel off. You'll feel out of alignment, out of balance. And so it's just a matter about finding what needs the work and then doing the work and then transmuting the energy and moving above it. But overall, Pisces energy, if you have Pisces sun, moon, or rising, and you're a 3, it's very complementary energy. It's a very beautiful balance. You have like in your higher expressions, you have like a healthy masculine energy and a healthy feminine energy, and they're coming together and assisting one another, right? They're working together. And then again, whereas in that lower elevation, you have the kind of clashing of the titans. So it's really powerful energy to be Pisces and a 3. It can work together very, very well. It can also work against each other very, very well. And so it's just a matter of, experiencing it, seeing what works for you, finding your balance, being aware of the energies and like how they're showing up, how they're presenting, and what you're doing with them, right? And if it doesn't feel good, there's probably a reason, and you need to figure out how to move above them. But hopefully this was helpful in showing you the different expressions and how they could potentially show up, and so that you can work with them, right? So take care, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you. Bye for now.